All right. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Dave Mayer with the Office for Catholic Schools. I'm pleased to be one of the co-chairs for a provider supports meeting, along with Julie and Katie, who you guys will see on the screen later. Welcome to our May 21st provider supports meeting. I think that our slides went away here for a second.
Dave.
And so, yeah.
Hey, Norma, I think you're in the English channel. Please switch over to Spanish. Thank you.
You good, Jessica? Okay, perfect. We are going to start by going over a couple of important pieces before we get to introductions, and then a review of our March meeting minutes and the feedback loop and agency updates. So that's going to be the first, 20, 25 minutes of our time. And then after that, we will move into our first topic of the day. So thank you all for joining. And as you continue to join, we will talk through a couple of these first pieces, important items here. So the first piece is interpretation. So on your Zoom screen, you should be able to find the globe icon at the bottom of the screen. When you click on that globe icon, you're going to click the language that you want to hear, whether that's English, Spanish. There's a variety of different languages that, English and Spanish for this particular one. And then you'll click mute original audio to silence all other languages. It's also important to note that if you are Spanish speaking today, that you can both in the chat ask questions via Spanish, and if you unmute your audio and ask a question verbally, you can also do that in Spanish, and everything will be translated, so everyone will be able to know what the question is. So that should work out. We will do a good job of reminding people to speak slowly as they go through their presentations, and also as us as facilitators, to make sure that we have a good opportunity for our wonderful translators that have joined us here today to be able to do that translation. So if you're here with us the whole time, you'll hear that reminder a couple of times because we do have people that jump in and out of the meeting and might come in during the middle of one of the presentations. And so we just do that to remind people again before the start of the next section. If you do have any questions about interpretation, you can stick those into the chat, and we have a couple of folks that will be able to answer those questions and get you connected to what you need to do. All right. I think we can move to the next slide. So we are going to do introductions, and I would love for those that have the opportunity to unmute, if we have 5 or 10 of those folks to be able to share with us today, that would be great. But we're celebrating Provider Appreciation Day today, which you will also hear about in another one of our presentations. And so today for our introductions, we'd love you to share what's a moment in your work as a child care provider that makes you feel especially proud or appreciated. So we're gonna focus on the positives and really uplift people today. So we can do one of two things. One, you can, if you're in a position where you aren't able to unmute, you can put this information into the chat, your name, where you're located, what your role is, and then what makes you feel especially proud or appreciated. But I would love if there were, 5 or 10 or so people that would be okay unmuting to really share with us this piece of introduction. So for those that are going to type in the chat, you can feel free to do that now. And if you want to either hand raise or come off mute to be able to share with us, we can do that now. Who would like to go first?
You go first, Dave.
I will go first. So my name is Dave. I'm located in the city of Seattle. However, I support programs all the way up and down the I-5 corridor from Bellingham to Vancouver. My role is the director of early childhood education with the Office for Catholic Schools in the Seattle Archdiocese. And the thing that really makes my work feel appreciated is when you get that. This happened to me the other day. You get one of those cards that a 3 or a 4-year-old makes, and them describing something that you were a part of with them and drawing the picture of it and being able to see their interpretation of what that was like was really cool. I have a whole bulletin board sitting up here to my left that has all these cards and pictures from kids throughout the years that are really, really great. So, all right, Julie, do you want to go next? And then we'll open it up to the group.
Sure. Thanks, Dave. I'm Julie Schroth. I'm located over in Kitsap County. I'm one of the co-chairs of this committee. And I am the owner. Appreciation Day. So being that I'm a little more removed, I think we all are a little removed from the classroom. I love going in, but the thing that makes me, and I think the teachers feel especially appreciated, is when you get that random note or message from a parent really singing the praises about something specific. Parents, they can be tough clients. They can be wonderful too. And to just get one of those notes about something is really fulfilling.
Julie, I'll go
Thanks, Julie.
next. My name is Katie, and I'm also one of the co-chairs of this committee. I'm in Kitsap County, just across the water from Julie from her centers. And I am the owner of 3 centers over in Bremerton, Silverdale, and then to be in Paulsville here shortly. And Celebration and Provider Appreciation Day, I love when I have kiddos run up to me and give hugs. It's not just once, it's every time I walk into the center. You have kids, whether they know you or not. Some of the kids know me because they've been with us for so many years. Some kids don't. And you just sit down on the floor and you let all the kiddos give you hugs. That's what makes me feel the most appreciated in this, in what we do every day. So thank you.
Awesome, Katie. Would someone else volunteer to come off mute and share an introduction of yourself? And again, if you are not able to come off mute, if you could take a couple of moments and put your introduction into the chat, that would be great to be able to see who is with us today. Emily has shared in the chat, which is great. And so feel free to go through and read those as well. Who else would like to unmute and share with us this morning? Don't be shy, otherwise I'm going to have to tell dad jokes for the next 5 to 10 minutes.
I'll come off.
Janelle, it
too,
looks like
Dave.
your hand is raised.
Yeah, I'll save us from the dad jokes there, Dave.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
I'm Janelle Waterman. I'm in Newport, Washington. I'm an in-home provider, capacity of 12. So I'm kind of everything around here. We do have some staff. As you know, that kind of fluctuates. I had one that had their last day yesterday, which was sad for us. So now I'm down to 3. Very part-time people. Anyway, I'm kind of there with Katie on the getting those greetings and those hugs from the kids in the morning, saying hello to everyone. That makes us feel pretty special every day.
Awesome. Thank you, Janelle. We have 2 more people volunteer to unmute and share.
I'll go ahead and go. Good morning, everybody. My name is Darlene Guerrero, and I'm the Executive Director of Hilltop Children's Center in Queen Anne, or Seattle. And I am especially proud of our team. We recently had a challenge where a family, well, I won't get into all the details, but it was a challenge, and we decided to self-report to licensing to be safe on our end on things. And I'm just really grateful for DCYF and our licensor for helping us navigate this situation and help us reconnect with our parents. And we did a lot of work to kind of reestablish trusting relationships. And it just was a reminder, if if you're open and honest and transparent about things, it's easy to get to the other side of challenging situations. So although it was tough, I think it's a celebration for us to be in line as a licensed provider.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. We have a couple of folks that have come into the chat as well. Rochelle shared that kiddos picking flowers from the playground and brought them to her is a really was something that really made her happy. And then another, Jamie had the thing that makes me so proud is when my staff go further into the ECE field. I have a former program supervisor that just finished her master's in ECE at Harvard. That's incredible. What a cool experience for that person. Deanna has been in DCYF in various roles for over a decade. And my kiddos were in excellent licensed care when they were younger, and it provided invaluable peace of mind. Nicole says, it's been a while since I worked in a classroom one-on-one connections with children and families, but the connections with children and families as they came into the classroom each day, and family style meals, which are always a good way to learn about what's going on with the kids throughout the day. Alondra, you feel free to share.
I guess I can go.
Awesome.
Hi, my name is Alondra. I'm from Yakima. I run 2 childcare centers. And what makes me feel appreciated is when kids look forward to see us on Monday after the weekends. Yeah.
That's cool. Thank you for sharing that. They're excited to be able to come back into the
Yeah.
program, which is really cool. Veronica?
Good morning, I'm Veronica Alsmail over in West Pasco, the owner of Busy Bees. One of the things, one of many that I really enjoy is the genuine unconditional love that these children have, and families as well. And watching also their professional development advance for our parents, and then also making a difference in shaping children's most critical developmental years.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. I saw some cool ones here. Linda, who's the director of compliance, visited a school the other day and saw teachers gently and empathetically help children with big feelings, and seeing the children not only feel calmer, but lean into their teachers with trust. So that was a really cool experience there. Katie said, I'm a former foster care provider, and my favorite moment was when my kiddos said I made the best food ever, which was never really that elaborate, but it doesn't take everything with the food sometimes for the kiddos. And then Susan, this one was pretty cool, getting a call from a former parent whose kids are now in high school, freshman and senior, that called to share how much the director at Kids Co at Tops means to their family still. So you think about that kind of lifetime of impact that we're making in our programs as well. And D, just when children, and I know that this was shared earlier by Alondra as well, just when children say good morning and are excited to be able to come back to the program on Mondays, and just to be able to have that that connection on a week to week and a day to day basis is pretty cool. So, and then Jen shared that just love seeing the teachers light up when they see a child pick something that they have been working on. The children light up and the teachers light up at the same time. And I think it really just shows kind of the joy that people have been experiencing. So thank you all for for sharing these in the chat. And if you haven't had the opportunity yet, please feel free to continue to put these into the chat as participants in our meeting today can continue to read through them and really see how themselves and their teachers are being impacted positively by working in all of the great programs that we have throughout the state. All right, Jessica, I think that we can move on to the next. So what we're going to do now is we're going to review the meeting materials. So the first one, if I remember correctly, is the March meeting minutes. Jessica has put those into the chat, and they were also sent out in the email prior to the meeting. So we're going to take 2 or 3 minutes just for people to review those if you have not had the opportunity to do so already. And then you can feel free to either unmute and or to raise your hand, and we can get any questions answered from any of the meeting minutes from our last meeting. So if you want to click on that in the chat and just do a quick read through. Looks like today it's just about 3 pages very quickly. And I'll let us read in silence for a minute and then we'll come right back.
I'm starving.
Was that a question for somebody, or Amy, did you just come off mute, I think?
Technical difficulty.
No, it's okay. Thirty more seconds. Okay, does anybody have any specific questions about anything that they saw in the meeting minutes? Please feel free to unmute and or raise your hand and we can get you called on.
Well, right off the top of the meeting minutes, it said there would be an update about PACE in May. So is that something that someone has an update on?
So Julie, I think what I would say is let's talk about that in the context of some recent legislation that's passed and how we fold that into the conversation related to staff qualifications.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thanks, Julie. Thanks, Nicole. Any other questions from anything that people saw in the minutes? All right, so the next document that we're going to review for about 2 minutes is the feedback loop. I think that Jessica will be able to put the link for that one. Yep, it is now in the chat as well. So if you want to take 1 or 2 minutes to look at the feedback loop, then we can review any questions that may have come up from that one. This one's only one page this time, so a quick look at it. Another 30 seconds on this one. Sandra, go ahead if you want to just unmute and ask your question. I think we're in a good spot for that now.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Question. We're still trying to, of course, go through all the ramifications of the new budget and everything, but I was wondering about ESIP, the infant and toddlers support program. Is that affected by any budget changes?
So Sandra, let me do a couple of double checks there and I'll get back to you all during the legislative update time, if that works for everybody. Okay, great. Thank you.
Well, and Dee has a question
Hi.
or comment.
Yeah, so I did click the provider credential search link in that agency update. And when I got there, so if you look for what the credential type is, there's a really long list. So I chose nutritionist. And when I chose that and tried to do a search, it said I had to put in the number, like the license number of the nutritionist I'm looking for or something. So I couldn't do like a search for a nutritionist in general. You have to kind of be looking for somebody in particular and know what their number is. So it's not really like a search for resources in that, need that we might have without actually knowing a nutritionist that you're looking at. So I didn't know that that would be a useful resource for us. We need something more like, here's resources that you can look up and what you can use. Everything. And I have found something like that on the health department thing once before, where I could look up some resources, but that particular link is not a search that I can use.
I don't know if anybody from DCYF might have a knowledge or comment on that, or to get us maybe connected to the right person that would, if they're not here.
Yeah, so Dave, this is Nicole again. So I want to take some of the ESIT pieces and connect with our ESIT team, and I'll work to have that happen during the meeting today. But if not, we'll follow up in the feedback loop.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep.
And I don't know, Nicole, there was a question in the chat, this may be someone else too, but how will HCA and DCYF support access to developmental services for children with special needs who are in childcare settings after age 3?
Yeah,
Same deal as the rest.
Yeah, I see that one as well. And I think, I just highlight here that once a child turns 3, that part of that is the responsibility of the school district. But I think we can try and group all of these together and get you all responses.
Okay. I just had one comment, and this is really more of a technicality, but I noticed in the community childcare conversations section, it was cool to see that it would make the most sense to include zip codes served by each office to include on that DCOF Early Learning and Childcare Office webpage. And then it says DCOF will not be adding email addresses due to the high rate of caseload changes. And that makes sense to me with changing staff, but I wonder if there's a pathway to be able to have a generic email for each office that wouldn't change based on staff turning over. It just seems like sometimes email is a quicker way for people to respond than phone calls in our current the current way that we're operating. So that might be something to consider if email is still a consideration to be able to add to that page as well.
Yeah, Dave, it's Ruben. Good morning.
Yeah.
Let me look at that. We can maybe locate one kind of email, whether that's our kind of admin support team in each region. Let me look at that and get back to you on that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Ruben. All right, and then we have about 4 minutes before our first presentation. We have one more document to look at, and that is going to be our agency updates. And so Jessica has just put that one into the chat as well. So if people want to click on that and spend 1 or 2 minutes to quickly scan that, if you have not had the chance to do that already, and then we'll take any questions on that before our first presentation today. All right, maybe 30 more seconds. All right, does anybody have any questions or comments about what they just scanned through or read previously about the agency updates? Okay, well, thank you for having all those together, and thank you, Jessica, for putting those in the chat for all of us to be able to read through. Oh, we do have one here quickly. Can DCYF consider mobile fingerprinting units for home-based providers or those with limited transportation, especially those caring for medically fragile children?
We have considered that, but with our current vendor, I just don't think they offer that services, Holden. But let me check in with our background check administrator to get a better, more clarification of why we can't do that and why it's not possible, and get back to you.
Excellent. Thank you for the question, Holden, and thank you, Ruben, for that answer. All right, so I know that there's been multiple people that have joined this meeting since we started at 9 o'clock. And so this is just a reminder before we go into our first section for those that haven't had the opportunity yet to click on the globe icon yep, thank you, Jessica, for going back to that. So for interpretation, please click on the globe icon at the bottom of the screen, click the language you want to hear, and then click mute original audio. And just a reminder that questions in the chat and verbally can come in both English and Spanish, so we can have that interpretation going. All right, I am going to pass this over to Julie to introduce our first section of the day. Julie.
Thanks, Dave. So today we're going to be opening with remarks from Ruben Reeves, our Assistant Secretary of Licensing. Also, Nicole Rose, our Assistant Secretary of Early Learning, who will be recognizing childcare providers in honor of Provider Appreciation Day. Then after that, we're going to go right into a discussion with Debbie Groff, who is DCYF's Childcare Deputy Senior Administrator. And she's going to be going over a summary of the 2024 Community Childcare Conversations, highlighting key themes, trends, and next steps. So welcome, guys. Thanks for coming.
Good morning. Thank you all. And I think, Ruben, we have a little something that we want to show before we give some of our opening remarks. So I want to turn it over to Jessica. And as she's putting that up there, I think, just share our appreciation for all that you do. And I personally really enjoyed the opening activity today to hear about everybody's favorite moments. And Ruben, I'll give you a moment here if there's something you want to share before we jump into this.
Thanks, Nicole. Very, very excited to show this video. And I, we talked about, and great question, Dave, at the beginning of, going,
Can't hear you, Ruben.
one of my favorite parts of my, am I muted? Can you hear me?
He's coming through for me,
Yeah,
Julie.
we can
Were
hear
having
you.
We
difficulty
can hear
here?
you.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
No
Yeah,
problem.
but no, Ruben, I think you're good to go.
Yeah. Thanks. One of my favorite part of my job is to go see providers, and just to see the smiles on the kids' faces and the staff and the passion that our providers have it's what makes me be here for almost 30 years, to be honest with you. And so I just want to take this moment as Provider Appreciation Month just to thank you for all you do. And we just have a kind of quick video we want to share just to show our appreciation and just thank you for the job that you do every day. So let's go.
So just again, another thank you for all that you do and just the impact that you have on all of the children and families that you are serving. So I'm grateful for you all and I'm happy to be here with you today. I think Ruben and I are going to talk a little bit about the community childcare forums. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ruben to talk a little bit about some of the pieces in licensing, and then we'll talk about some of the early learning portions as well.
Thanks, Nicole. So a few weeks ago, everyone should have received the 2024 final report that came out of the in-person childcare forums. We received a ton of information and held many in-person meetings throughout 2024 and a couple of virtual ones. You've heard me say this before. There was definitely some themes that came out of these meetings and that we collected and did a report, and we just wanted to follow up with that. So you got the report. Welcome to answer any questions you may have on this, but I just wanted to, Nicole and I wanted to share just a couple of things that came out of the report. And one of them was consistency in WACs, right? Standardized WAC training across the state. They came out in every forum. So just wanted to highlight what was in that report, which is our childcare licensing staff receive WAC training as part of their 6-month onboarding training plan when they first get hired. As most of you know, we also have a internal review committee that when there's opportunities to look at whether there's things that we cited for or ballots, that we have an internal review committee to look at that and determine either to uphold or overturn those findings, or also an opportunity to change our WAC sometimes too in our policies. So the internal review committee we meet every week, and that also helps with being consistent of how we interpret and also enforce our rules and regulations in childcare licensing. In this report, also talked about our culture of collaborative compliance and strength-based approach, and that is true not only for our childcare licensing team, but all of our licensing programs we get to oversee and provide customer service for within LD and DCYF. And that is our culture that we are trying to create. And we know it's not perfect, guys, but we are constantly going to be looking at that and training our staff to use that collaborative compliance and strength-based approach. So that was also in the report. And then we just, put a plug in there for participating in rulemaking. It's important, and I heard this from the forums about improving communication when it comes to new WACs and revising WACs, and we need to do a better job in that. So committed to really send any revisions of WACs to this group and ELAC. Of course, we have the websites, but everyone's so busy. So it's just better communication around whenever there's an opportunity to revise our WACs, to look at that, to make sure we get inputs before they're finalized. So you have an opportunity to really look at these rules and regulations and how they're going to impact the children in your program. So that was just one of them regarding our response to consistency for WAC training. So before we move on to the next slide, Julie, looks like you have a question on this particular one, so I'll bye.
Thank you. I'm so sorry I interrupted earlier. I don't know.
problem,
Anyway, so once upon a time there was legislation created that they created something called an internal review panel, and it meant that there were 3 DCYF licensing staff and 3 child care providers that would do essentially what you're talking about, the internal review committee. They would go over when providers were maybe suspended or whatever, and they would help decide if it was fair. I know there was a pilot. I know Luke Jasmine, Brian Trimble, and Lois Martin were the providers on that pilot. And then the oversight committee took applications to create the official, moving it away from the pilot. And I'm just wondering, I know that we maybe know what happened to that. It was, like I said, legislation, but I'm hoping that since you guys do have this internal process that sounds very similar to what I'm talking about, maybe there could be some providers included in that process.
Thanks, Julie. I'm gonna punt this over to Debbie, if that's okay, to kind of also talk about how kind of the first time forgiveness comes in. And you know what? Before I just want to I want to recognize someone being in this room. Travis Hansen, our child care licensing senior administrator, is back this week. And so you see him on the screen today. He just came back earlier this week. There he is. And we're trying to get caught up. So I just want to do that special shout out and welcome back, Travis. So just wanted to highlight that. But Debbie, can you kind of talk about the internal review committee, first time forgiveness, and why we haven't included, the providers as part of this there?
I will, and I'll go off camera just because of connectivity and apologize in advance for my dog barking. She's struggling with something outside. So Julie, that's a great question. There is absolute statute on this, and the statute reads that community review panel would review things that were non-health and safety related WACs. So what happens with that is, because our WACs that are non-health and safety typically fall to technical assistance and first-time forgiveness, they haven't risen to the level of non-compliance needing a review. So it's all kind of interrelated with that first-time forgiveness ask that came out, I believe, out of this provider supports group of maybe thinking about doing away with first-time forgiveness. We have looked into first-time forgiveness going away. There's a system issue that could complicate that, but it's not that it's not going to happen. We just have to do it very strategically so we don't break our system. So if indeed and when first-time forgiveness goes away and the non-health and safety items show up on a inspection report, then and go through the review process that we have built in DCYF and get to that community review level, then we are going to be ready to review at that level. We have the names of folks who were interested. They're still on our docket, and we will be reaching out to ensure that we follow through with that statute when indeed we get to that opportunity with our rules.
Thanks, Debbie. Next slide, please. The next one is, I talked about, the key actions and process for consistency. We talked about the collaborative compliance and strength base, and again, it's in the report. And then also make sure that we're providing good customer service and that licensor response time, right? So we took all this information we gathered in the 2024 forums and meeting with our area administrators, meeting with our supervisors, meeting with our staff, again, how we can provide better customer service and customer support to our child care providers. So just wanted to highlight that. And then Emily, are you on Arneson and can talk about an update on liability insurance? Because that came up in a lot of the forums.
I am here. Ruben, can you hear me?
Yes, thanks, Emily.
I am here, although I have a whole section on the agenda from 10:30 to 11 to speak about liability insurance.
Okay.
Of plenty of time
Yep.
to
So
talk about that.
let's wait for that for sure.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Thank you. Capacity waiver. There's been a lot of talk in the forums in 2024 and a lot of decisions that were made at the beginning of this year. We've held a couple of webinars for our family home providers and made some decisions around that, extending another year for those in-home family providers that have a capacity over 16 to be in compliance. So that continues to be on our radar and working with those 60 providers that are currently on a waiver. And next slide, please. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Sorry, this might have been wait till the end, but I didn't know how far we were going to keep going on the capacity or on the consistency piece. One of the things I know we've talked about in the past was not on the monitoring visit reports was, let's say that a staff was out of date on their bloodborne pathogens. That might connect to 3 or 4 different WACs, and so that same compliance issue gets listed 3 or 4 times. I know that we had talked about doing away with that, but we're still seeing that pop up. And so I don't know if we're in the process of stopping listing all of those over and over again on the same monitoring report is in terms of the conversations with the licensors.
Debbie, can you talk about that? So Dave, you're kind of looking at like double jeopardy, right? Of, you know, having 3 or 4
Yeah, and
different
sometimes
subsections of the
triple,
WAC being-
sometimes triple
yeah.
and quadruple because, and it's, you know, it's just the way that the WAC's written
On
that
one
some
issue.
of those issues are just, you know, can affect multiple different WACs.
Yeah, Dave, it's a really good call out. We do have Michelle Sampillo, and Michelle, I'm going to drag you in here because WAC Compass is currently working on a 1-to-1 ratio of WAC violation and the observation. But Michelle has a little more information maybe to share on that. Michelle, are you here?
I am.
Oh, thank you.
As far as the 1-to-1, it's for the observations. We're currently working on it. We ran into an issue with our mobile application that our staff use out in the field when they are working the checklist. And so we've been trying to work through that, getting our vendor involved. And so we are currently working through that. I think by the beginning of next fiscal year, we're trying to be very mindful of trying to not impact the current work that staff are doing because releasing this update will kind of have a bigger impact to them with kind of some work that they have to do with clearing off casework and stuff like that. So we're trying to be mindful of that. So I'm thinking by the beginning of next fiscal year, we should be able to have that in place so that when they make a citation, their observation will be for that particular regulation. So you won't see that kind of grouping that you're seeing on the inspection report where you could have three
Yeah.
regulations and 3 observations, or 1 regulation and 3 observations showing. It will be one observation for 1 regulation. And then if there's something that needs to be disputed, it's much easier to have it come off, or it makes it very clear and much easier to read for both staff and providers in that sense. So hopefully that will help on that. So that should be coming soon, at least on that piece within the system. So hopefully
Well, thanks, Michelle.
that will help there.
Thank you.
Dave, let's continue having this on the radar. Let's make sure, I will make sure to provide an update at our next provider support meeting too, just so we have it on there. And so, okay. I'm going to hand it off to Nicole just to provide just a brief overview of what was in the report out of the 2024 Community Child Care Forums. Remember, we're doing this together, Licensing Division, Early Learning, right? And did this together, and we'll continue to work together in 2025. So there was obviously some themes and patterns that came out that we want to address for on behalf of Early Learning. So, Nicole.
Thanks, Ruben. And as Ruben said, it was really great to be out there to hear from you all and to learn about what would be most beneficial as you are serving children and families. One of the things I'll note as we go into the early learning section is that many of these things require funding. And we're going to talk quite a bit about funding in the past legislative session at 11 o'clock. I'll reserve those comments for then, but we certainly heard the need to increase rates and continue to move childcare subsidy payment closer to the private market. And so to look at things like enrollment-based paying at the beginning of the month, and also really heard about shortening the approval timeline for special needs. And I know that some work has happened there, and we're continuing to have some conversations in the agency about the special needs rate process and if there are some additional things that we might be able to do there. Much of these, as I noted, do require funding. So if we can go to the next slide. we have heard from you all as we have gone out and done site visits, just the needs of children who are coming into care, and really wanting to support providers in continuing to access not only complex needs funds, but complex needs training. There was some legislative action on some of these pieces. We will continue to work with the Herring Center to offer complex needs training. I'll talk a little bit later about complex needs funds. There is continuing money for complex needs funds. It's a little bit less than we had in the past, but we'll continue to get those dollars out there as providers apply for them. And grants. So I heard a lot from you all about grants, and sometimes what we heard was about grants not only inside the agency, but grants that might have been offered by some of our partners as well. And I think what we heard overall was just making sure that everyone was aware of the different grant opportunities that were out there, as well as the technical assistance and supports that are available. And some of that happens through our contracted partners. One of the things I will note as we think about grants for this coming year, because funding looks a little bit different, what those opportunities look like may look a little bit different as well. And we're going to be working through that at DCYF. And one of the things we've really appreciated is the opportunity to come here and to other places as we refine those grant opportunities. And really happy to have our communications team who is really helping us think about how we can continue to plain talk our resources and get everything into one place so that it's easy for providers to navigate. The next thing that we have on here is staff qualifications. So if we want to go to the next slide, thank you. So this is one that I'm happy to say we're going to talk a little bit about later today. And we heard, and the legislature heard from you all as well around extending the timeline for meeting the requirements, and really wanting to make sure that we can look at all of our resources that are not only out on our website, but in some of our career planning portal and some of those places, to really make it clear about what the pathways are for providers to meet their staff qualifications. So there was a piece of legislation that passed that extends the timeline to meet those qualifications, and then really asks DCYF to work with a variety of providers on a work group across early learning and school age care to take a look at what those staff qualifications pathways will be in the future. So more to come on that. I think this is one where we are seeing some action though, and we'll get to continue to have some forward momentum here. And the next one on here was around training. And one of the things that we have heard during the community childcare forums and in these forums as well is just the ability to access training, and can we get you the right training at the right time? And so some of that means, what does childcare basics look like? Do we have enough childcare basics out there? Do we have enough of our equal trainings out there? And so we are working through that as well, and we'll continue to update that and update you all as we try to increase the availability of training across the state. And the final thing on here is merit. And I think we hear about merit almost everywhere we go. Some people really like it. Some people talk about merit and wanting it to do different things and wanting to improve that usability of merit and really have the ability to access their information in a different way. And so we have a team that works on merit. I will say, you know, in particular to the staff qualifications piece, I know we'll really be working on what does that dashboard look like, so that folks can really see where they are in the staff qualifications process. And that's for our providers as well as our licensors. And I know that the team is continuing to work on how they can continue to get information out there about what are the most common things to do in Merit. I know they've done office hours and different provider webinars in the past. And so I would say that this is also in progress, and it's always helpful to hear your feedback and what's working and what isn't working in those data systems. And then we try and prioritize that within the other things we need to do in our data systems to meet legislative requirements. So some things that require funding that we'll talk a bit about later, some things that are in progress. And again, just a deep appreciation for all of the feedback that you've given us, and looking forward to the continued conversations to let us know how we're doing and to help us think through ways we can increase our services to you all even more. And I think the final thing here is the summary to the full report. And I think that link got dropped in the chat as well. And so again, just thank you so much for everything you shared with us throughout these forums. I think they were a great opportunity to get out there and strengthen relationships and really have a two-way dialogue about how things are working out in the community. Ruben, any final words?
No, that's it. Just want to reiterate, thank you. It was I really enjoyed, and I enjoyed visiting providers along the way as well.
And I just realized, I think we're going to give an update on the 2025 forums as well. So I'm going to turn that to you to provide, or to Debbie to provide that update.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, we learned so much early on in 2025. We scheduled out about 3 community childcare conversations. We were able to host 2 virtual conversations, and then we quickly learned that they really weren't conversations at all. They were more presentations, and that's not what we wanted to do. We did have, and still do, a travel freeze in effect, so it really prevented our staff from getting out there and hosting these in person. But we are moving forward summer of 2025. We've already got a couple slated in the Tri-Cities area to host in-person childcare conversations. And I think that's the key word here, conversation. We want to be in the room with all of you and have that opportunity for discussion and not just presentation. So we paused our virtual settings that we put out there to try to meet the need, but we will move forward with our in-person community childcare conversations. And I believe there are some already on the docket for the summer, and we will be putting more dates out on the website for future gatherings. So just so you know, we really want to keep doing this. We found it so beneficial in 2024, and we want to continue this, invite our partners over in early learning to be there as well, and really to meet those community needs. So there's a little bit of work being done with the communities before we schedule, so that we are ensuring that what you're needing in your community as childcare providers is being brought to the room. So look forward to contacts in the future and dates that we can all meet in person. We're all looking forward to it.
Thank you, Debbie. And thanks, Nicole and Ruben, for your remarks. We are going to move on to our next section, but I did see a comment from Linda Y in the chat. Is that something I'd like to make sure that that gets added to the feedback so that it can be directly responded to from DCYF? So we're a little bit over time, so we're going to move on. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance and your comments today. It's really helpful to hear what's going on with those childcare community forums, and hopefully there will be many more to come. So next we're going to hear from Michelle Sempilo, not sure if I said that right, the WA Compass product owner, who's going to walk us through a show and tell on the dispute process within the WA Compass system. We've also got Debbie Groff again, the Child Care Deputy Senior Administrator, who's here to answer any questions related to the policy or the overall process.
Yes, thank you. And let me share my video here. So if I am able to share my screen, I'm actually going to do it live. I had the PowerPoint just in case. Sometimes when you're doing it live, things go haywire. So I had a backup just in case. So I am going to send a request, see if I can share my screen here so that we can do it live and show everyone actually in the system. So I don't know. Oh, here we go. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. I have,
Yes.
okay, awesome. So as was mentioned, my name is Michelle Sampilo and I am the Walk Compass product owner. So that's basically the system that is used by childcare licensing staff in the maintenance of licenses. It's also kind of the system that drives the provider portal, which you all get into to be able to kind of engage with staff, look at the inspection reports, different things like that. So I wanted to be able to have an opportunity to kind of go through the process of what you go through to request a dispute in the system, and then also during that, Debbie, we can also kind of talk about what that process looks like as far as not only just in the system, but also with staff on that side. So I wanted to go ahead and get started with that. So the first thing is that you all will get notified that there is an inspection report that contains information of items that were found out of compliance during a visit. So you'll receive an email that has an inspection report and also has a link to the provider portal. So there are kind of a couple different ways that you can get to the login for the Walk Compass provider portal. So that initial email is one. It has links to the Walk Compass provider portal. You can use that link. Here's kind of an example of what that email looks like. The inspection report is attached, so you can see what those items that were found out of compliance are. You can also go to the Child Care Check website, and there is a login here towards the top, the upper right side of the page that has a login here. You can also go to the DCYF website, and I apologize, this one's a little bit trickier to get to it. You can either search for it and type in provider portal and go that way, or what you can do is you can click on services and go to providers. Oops, sorry here. And then go to childcare and early learning providers. And then this first option here that says become a early or licensed early learning childcare or school age provider. If you click read more, there's an option here that says Walk Compass provider portal. If you click on that, there's information about the provider portal, but it also contains a link to the login page. I would recommend saving that as a bookmark because that will be how you log into that system moving forward for any time you need to request a dispute, put in correction dates for your inspection report, request a waiver or a variance, do things like that in the system. You can also go in and update things such as your schedule for your facility, upload things like a logo, just different things like that that can display on Child Care Check to help with kind of marketing your facility. So I would recommend bookmarking that so that you kind of have easy access to it. You do want the system works best on Chrome. So if you're not using Chrome, you will get a pop-up that recommends that you use Chrome to access the system. But when you get to the provider portal login page, it's going to look similar to this, and it's going to ask you to enter in a username and password. So I'm going to put in my password here. I've got my username entered in, and you're going to hit login. And it's going to take you to a home page. And so your home page is going to look very similar to this. If you have multiple accounts, you can click this drop down arrow next to the facility name and select the account that you want to access. If you only have one account that you're associated with, it will just default to that account, but you want to be mindful to make sure that you're on the correct account. But again, you will get that email with the inspection report and that says that you have items to review, and you will have 10 business days from the date of that email to log in and dispute certain items on the report. So when you log in, you're going to click on this licensing tab right here. And then you're going to go to this inspection report kind of sub tab. And it's going to pull up, yours probably won't have this many reports. This is a test environment, but you're going to find the number, the case number that matches with that inspection report that was provided, and click on view report. And what it's going to do is it's going to pull up kind of just a live version of that inspection report. And what you're going to do is you'll see that there's, it looks very similar to that PDF copy of the inspection report. It has an area for non-compliances, and then it has an area, I apologize for the scrolling. It has an area for technical assistance provided. So anything that falls under this technical assistance provided section is what is referred to as first time forgiveness. So these items are not disputable in the provider portal because they are first time forgiveness. So they're more of technical assistance was provided, and they're not reported on child care check. So Debbie, I'm not sure if there's anything that you want to kind of add on to that. I know that we spoke a little bit earlier at the beginning about first time forgiveness and the updates that we plan to make in the future with it.
Now, I think you were pretty clear, Michelle. I guess, offer it up if anybody had a question about that information at this time, beyond what was already asked. If not, I think we can move along, Michelle.
Okay, awesome. So you will be able to dispute any of the items that are located under this non-compliance section, because again, those are items that did not fall under the first time forgiveness. If you don't see any inspection reports under that section, that means that you don't have any that are actively in progress at the time. So this is just for current, active, in progress inspection reports that need some sort of action. So if you have it that where it says none are available, that could be a thing. So it's only if you've had visits recently that you would have something showing on here. So again, if you've gotten an email that says that you have an inspection report that you need to review, then you should have a report showing under here. So you can dispute anything that's listed under this non-compliance section. If there is an item that you wish to dispute, what you would do is you would locate that item. The WAC number is listed with the actual text from the WAC. You can see what the observation is that the licensor entered from what they observed when they did the visit. And what you would do is there's a checkbox under this dispute that you would check to say, I want to dispute it. And there's going to be a pop-up that appears that basically says, are you sure you want to start this dispute process? It's just to verify that, yes, you do. You'll click yes to continue, or if you clicked that box in error, you would just click no, and it'll take you back to that previous screen and you can just carry on. In this scenario, we want to dispute, so I'm going to click yes. And what you would do is it will have this dispute description box appear. Previously, this box is kind of grayed out. You can't enter anything into it. But now it's kind of open where you can enter stuff into it. So you can now type your reason for why you're disputing. So this can be anything as to the reason that you want to dispute. So you'll just type that in there, whatever those points are that you want DCYF to be aware of, why you are disputing, and you feel like they should relook at this and make a different decision on that regulation. So you can follow these same steps. So whatever other items that are listed here that you want to dispute, you can follow these same steps. Mark this dispute checkbox, click yes, and enter in your reason. You can do that for any other items that you want to dispute. Just repeat that for any items. And once you've done that for all the items that you want to dispute, you'll scroll down here and you'll click submit. And it's thinking here just a moment. I do want to call out that you don't need to sign the inspection report. There's no need to sign it. The licensor is the only one that signs the inspection report. So I know that's something that has come up sometimes where people will print out a copy of the PDF and sign it and send it back. You don't need to sign anything. You will get a pop-up once you submitted it that says your changes were successful. You can just hit OK. And then you can exit, just click X to close out of this. And then you can close out of this, log out of the provider portal. What happens now is that your licensor will be notified that you have requested a dispute on whatever items that you marked that you wanted to dispute. You can, at this point, the licensor will kind of, once they get the notification, they will review that request and make sure that everything is complete, and they will forward it on to the supervisor for review. If you do have any documentation that you want to have sent along with your dispute, you can email that to your licensor to have them include with your dispute. So I do want to call that out, that you do have that option to email any additional documentation that you want directly to your licensor to have them include. At that point, once the supervisor gets the dispute, they will review it and they will make a decision. So Debbie, I don't know if you wanted to kind of expand on that point, what kind of supervisors do
Sure.
when they're reviewing it.
Sure. Thank you, Michelle. Currently we have a policy and procedure that kind of directs our staff as to how to process these disputes. And for the supervisor task, it says that they may contact the provider or the requester. We are shifting on that. We are saying that they must contact the provider. And that's going to take a little bit of time to get it back into our policy to change the wording. But we have already guided our supervisors that when they receive one of these requests, they must reach out to the provider. Now, that reach out could be in the form of a phone call, an email, or really a visit to the program. And we're really leaning into the visit to the program, specifically if the request involves something that the provider and the supervisor can see together. So maybe it's something in an environment issue that the provider, wants to show the supervisor what they're talking about and why they're requesting the review. So we are really leaning into this shift of having that real communication opportunity between the supervisor and the provider. We are now addressing it with our soups. It will take a while for everybody to kind of shift. So I don't want you to think tomorrow's going to be the magic day that someone's going to show up. But I just want to let you know that Travis and I are very committed to having our supervisors enter into a dialogue with providers so that you have an ample opportunity to share your story. Because sometimes when you're typing it in, which is a perfect system, type your response in, sometimes you can't capture it all the way you really want us to receive it. So we are working on this shift. I think it absolutely lends itself to our collaborative compliance approach. And I believe we're all going to better understand our rules and how many, many ways we can be compliant with our rules. So really looking forward to us moving forward with that shift in the way we do our supervisory reviews.
Thanks, Debbie. Appreciate that. So yeah, the supervisor will review it, should be reaching out to get communication, visit, all that stuff with you all, and they will make a decision, and you will get an email with the outcome of that decision. If the supervisor agrees with the licensor's original decision, you will get an email that says that they've upheld the licensor's decision with the reasoning behind it. The email will look similar to this, just to give you an example. What will happen is if the supervisor does agree with that licensor's original decision, the dispute is then automatically sent to the internal review committee. So you don't have to take any action at this point. It's just automatically sent to that internal review committee for them to review and look at it. The internal review committee will then take a look, they'll convene, they'll take a look at the request with your original information and what the supervisor put down, any documentation as well that you submitted, and they'll make a decision. And again, you will receive an email with that outcome. If you do not want to have that dispute continue to the internal review committee, you can opt out of that next kind of level of dispute. So I wanted to kind of show you all how you can do that opt out, which you can do at any time. So again, this requires you to log into the provider portal and be on the correct account. And you're going to go to the licensing tab and click the inspection report subtab and then view your report. And anything that is currently in dispute will have an opt out button, and you can click that, which then pops up a kind of a display to say, are you sure that you want to opt out? By doing that, you are stopping the process, which means that you accept the current valid status of the violation. And you can either click yes or no. Yes means that you're agreeing to this pop-up and you're agreeing with that valid kind of status, which means that non-compliance item will remain. So if you want to opt out, you will hit yes, which then will send a notification to your licensor to withdraw that dispute from the system. So that's how you opt out if you don't want it to continue. So I wanted to show that you can do that at any time for anything that is currently in dispute in the system. Once you've done that, again, you just X out, click this little X button, and you're back to kind of your page. You can log out. I did want to show what if you do have any questions on how to do processes in the provider portal. This help tab here, there's two sections within here. There is this tip sheet section, which if you click on it, has several tip sheets that walk through different processes within the system, and they're available in several languages. But the one that has information on being able to enter disputes is under this entering correction dates on an inspection report. And you can pick the language that best suits your needs. But you can also look at other processes if you need them and pick, tip sheets to view that. We also have this useful links section, which has links to various processes and forms and other helpful information for providers that might be helpful. So I just wanted to call those out because those sometimes are not as well known for everyone, that those are there and those are available for you all to view and to help you as you're navigating in the system and being able to know where to go. If you do run into any issues with being able to log into the system or accessing, navigating anything, you can reach out to the provider portal support team. And I'm going to put their email and their phone number in the chat. But you can email, you can call. The response rate is really, really wonderful. And we'll work with you to get you logged in, help you navigate the system, work through any issues that you're having. But that is pretty much the process for going through and requesting a dispute, and the process kind of with staff when those disputes are received. So hopefully that was helpful for everyone. Not sure if anyone has questions at this point.
I will say I have a whole slew of questions, but we have to move on. Unfortunately, I'm gonna make sure that they're submitted, for the feedback loop so they can be responded to, but we so appreciate you coming. The presentation was wonderful. I know it kind of bleeds into our next topic, which will be after the break, which is on the insurance and how that's affecting providers, I hope. So anyway, we appreciate the information. Very helpful, very helpful. We do want to take a few minutes to have people provide some feedback on the Menti link, and you can provide feedback to any section that we've already talked about, because I forgot to mention it after the previous section. So the Menti link is in the chat. You can put as many comments in there as you would like. And then after that, we are going to take just a very brief break, but please take a little time to, I'm actually going to put my comments in the Menti. So we're going to take a few minutes for that, for the Menti. We've got some good comments and questions coming in. We are going to take a brief break. The Menti link stays open. Please continue to provide feedback. Okay, I see that answer, Michelle. Disputes only available for 10 business days. I do think providers need a little more time on that. We're exceedingly busy oftentimes. So we will be back at 10:30. Just take a minute to walk around or stay and keep filling out those your feedback and comments, questions. Okay, hopefully everybody had a little time to fill out some comments, feedback. The Menti link will stay open. But we are going to move on to our next presenter. We're going to hear from DCYF's Regulatory and Legal Administrator, Emily Arneson. Emily will share an update on the increasing cost and limited availability of liability insurance for childcare providers. She's also going to explain how these insurance challenges are impacting licensing and provide an overview of DCYF's continued efforts to engage with the Office of Insurance the Insurance Commissioner on this issue. First, though, I just want to take a minute and remind folks that may have joined late to go to the globe at the bottom of your screen to make sure that you've check marked the English so that the interpretation services and all of that works well for you. So if I could just mention real quick, we know that providers across the state have dealt with insurance being pulled, revoked, whatever, from things that insurance agents are finding on Child Care Check. We've heard these stories, which is why Emily's here today. Personally, I know a provider about 2 miles down the street from me that called me a couple months ago in a panic because her insurance got canceled after they looked on Child Care Check. It was something that she was written up for that she absolutely should have disputed, but she ran out of time. She was busy. She was trying to get staffed and she just didn't dispute it. And the fact that the insurance agent was able to go on there and read it and canceled her insurance is shocking to all of us, but we've started to hear these stories more and more. So we appreciate Emily coming today and we're ready for you, Emily.
Great, thank you for having me. Let's see, I'm sorry, I'm moving things around so I can see what I need to see here to speak to you all. So as you said, my name is Emily Arneson. My title here at DCYF is the Regulatory Legal Administrator, so I'm in the legal office. I do a number of different things for the agency, kind of a utility player, so to speak, for when things come up that need someone to take the lead on and assist with. And so I've been asked to work on this, knowing it's been something that has, it's been a topic of conversation for many years, from what I understand, far before I joined the agency last September. By way of background, I have a varied history. I'm an attorney. I've worked in private practice. I've also worked for transit agencies, Department of Corrections, and in higher education. I'm thrilled to be here at DCYF, and I feel like I've finally found a very good home that I hope to stay at for a long time. So I'm glad to be here talking with you about all of this. This is a tough subject. It's a hard thing because DCYF is very aware of what you've been telling us and these concerns and challenges, and it's hard because there's a limit to what we have the ability to influence when this is a private insurance market. That is not to say that we're not going to do anything, though. So, you know, as I said, for some time, we've been hearing from providers in our partner agencies that they're seeing high premium prices, and also this more recently, lack of availability of insurance at all. What's important to understand, I think, at the outset is that this issue is much larger than just childcare, just DCYF, and it's much larger than just the state of Washington. Many of you know have colleagues in other states that have been seeing the same things. So it is an industry trend in the insurance industry. But obviously, we can't meet the needs of the families in this state if we don't have you as partners and you're not able to do the good work that you do. So we're looking for some creative options in this space, and definitely going to have to be a multi-pronged approach because this is a complicated issue with a variety of different related concerns. There's really two issues at play. There's both the cost issue and the availability issue. They're related, have some of the same causes, but some of the efforts to address them might be a little bit different, but still hopefully parallel. So as has been mentioned, we have been in talks with the Office of the Insurance Commissioner, and that's not new. The agency has been working with the Office of the Insurance Commissioner for years on this issue. But more recently, we have been speaking with them, in particular in light of the fact we have a new insurance commissioner who was elected last fall. So we have a different different perspective from a different elected official. Some of the same folks still involved though in that office, one of whom, David, has been very helpful with talking through this issue with us. So I thought I would briefly summarize what he has told us about the insurance markets. I hope I do it justice because I'm not an expert in this as he is, but I think it's helpful to hear some of what he told us in the background of why this is happening. And then I can go into some of the things that we've considered to address it, and some of the things that are maybe some updates that you haven't heard yet based on the recently signed budget. So what David has explained to us is this is what they call a hard market in both the property and casualty insurance markets, meaning that insurance companies as a whole tend to pull back because they don't feel that they have enough capital to feel comfortable supporting the same types of risks that they used to insure. These markets tend to be cyclical because it takes time for the companies to adjust their risk models, their algorithms, to understand the patterns and the levels of risk that they're starting to see. Those have to be adjusted both when regulatory changes are made, such as when the statute of limitations for claims was changed in the state of Washington. But also we're seeing a lot of unpredictable climate issues, environmental issues, catastrophes like fires and storms and things like that. And so that's also draining the capital for these insurance companies, and they're pulling back as a result. So the availability of insurance, whether they offer these policies at all, is of course based on the perception of risk, and so is the cost of the insurance. That cost is based on the cost of claims, what they expect to have to pay out if a claim is filed. So the Office of the Insurance Commissioner, OIC, has told us that in the past, they have had conversations about these issues with group foster homes for years. It's more recent that we're also talking in the child care setting as well. And they've been hearing from child care providers as well, and other youth serving organizations in general about the unavailability and cost of this insurance. So as I said, the change in the statute of limitations in the state of Washington is really a huge driver for this because that opens up a lot of claims and very high claims. It's affected this particular insurance market very deeply. So according to what the OIC has told us is that really the only way to reduce that cost of insurance is to reduce the cost of claims, which there's a limit to what any of us can really do, either the providers or the agency can really do in that respect. There are sort of stopgap measures. There's been suggestions to subsidize the cost, things like that, but that's not really reducing the true cost of what's going on in the insurance market. So I have two sort of categories to let you know of things that have been suggested and considered, and things we're still considering and working on. On the cost side versus the availability side, it has been suggested to remove the insurance requirements entirely from the contracts that we have and from our expectations of our partners, which is really doesn't really address the problem because the liability is still there. The risk is still there for the businesses who are working in this space, and one claim in terms of defense costs, even if it's an unfounded claim, could be the end of a business, even if they were absolutely not at fault for anything. So it doesn't really get to the underlying problem. What also has been suggested is that the agency could adjust rates to cover the cost of this higher cost of insurance. In the current budget environment, you all are very well aware, I'm sure, of the shortfall that the legislature encountered this past session. and what we expect to continue for the immediate future. So it's not impossible, but that's a hard sell to legislature that's trying to cut things and not wanting to raise revenue at this point. Not off the table, just a challenge. Childcare check you mentioned. That was one of the things I wanted to bring up. We have been informed of that before, that insurance agents are using childcare check to as sort of a risk assessment tool when they're setting rates. And that's really a misuse of the website. That's not what it's for. That's not how it's formatted. It's not adequate information for them to really be able to make that kind of assessment. We have to include certain information on that site because of federal regulations. But we have had some discussions about what maybe other information that we could include to reflect, if there's a certain non-compliance issue that's reported, what else can we, how can we format it? What else could be added to make sure that it's very clear if that non-compliance report has then been rectified or has been determined to be unfounded, for instance. So there's some work that can be done in that area to sort of address that, adding non-required information to paint a better picture, a more fair picture of what's really going on in those instances, so that if those agents continue to misuse the website in that way, it's absolutely not the intention of what that website is for. At least they're getting more relevant information so that they're getting a fuller picture. In terms of options for availability of insurance, the agency itself is prohibited from indemnifying our contractors and licensees, any non-state agency based on Supreme Court precedent. So we can't indemnify a non-state actor. Again, it's been suggested that we just remove those requirements so that folks can meet the requirements of contracts. But again, they still need it for themselves. So it doesn't really get to the effect that we're looking for. One thing that's been suggested is risk pools, like public schools, transit agencies, and some other public entities have risk pools where they, it functions like an insurance policy. And that is a possibility. It would help for availability of these issues because there wouldn't be the aspect of a private insurance market doing whatever they choose to do. We don't have control over in terms of offering policies, but it would not really help with the cost because there still has to be enough capital in that pool to pay out on those claims that are expected. And actuarially, we have to have the buy-in to cover that capital for those claims. So there wouldn't be the profit aspect of private insurers if we did a risk pool, but it would still be very expensive and probably prohibitively expensive, especially for small businesses. So what we're optimistic about right now is that the Office of Insurance Commissioner has worked with some legislators about options to address this. And what they've said is they need more data. They need to understand what claims are being submitted, how much they are ending up being, what the insurance companies are really concerned about, a number of different things about the claims that have happened. And so the Office of Insurance Commissioner requested, and it was included in the budget that was signed yesterday, a proviso for a sum of money to fund a study that would look into all of the different options available in this space, and in one in particular, which I'll explain in a moment. The study that they want to do is actually, they already have an RFP open for it to seek contractors to bid on this RFP. It's been open for, I think, a little over a month. They were, I suppose, betting on the fact that it would be included in the budget. So the RFP is open. I think it closes next week. So a contractor will be selected quickly and get to work quickly. Their due date for their study on this is the end of November. So then the OIC will be able to turn that around into a report to the legislature by the end of the year. That way the legislators will have that data, not a recommendation, so to speak, but an explanation of all the different options and pluses and minuses about those for the next session or for the supplemental session next year. It was a $350,000 proviso that was allotted to that. I can put the link to the RFP into the chat when I'm done speaking so that you can look at it if you're interested in seeing what they've included in that. What they're specifically asking the study to address is this history of claims, but also what's called a joint underwriting association. And a joint underwriting association is kind of like a risk pool. It's something that states can create essentially for high risk business areas. So my understanding is there is one in the state of Washington for midwifery. It's a high risk business, high value claims that come in. And so these are the types of businesses that have a really hard time getting insurance in the private market. So the state can create a joint underwriting association for this. It is sort of like a risk pool, but the difference is that it essentially forces private insurance companies to be like a backstop. If the capital in that pool gets too low to be able to meet the needs of the claims, then those insurance companies will be assessed. There will be assessments against them. They will be required to pay in to cover that difference. It's been described as an extreme tool. I think that David from the OIC called it, in case of emergency, break glass type of tool. Because what makes it extreme is that insurance companies will view that as a tax on them to be operating here, and they may choose to move out of Washington. And we don't want that either, because that makes it certainly harder in the long run as well. So we don't want them to move out of the state. But this is a potential compromise to be able to find a way to offer this type of liability insurance to this high risk area, what has become a high risk area as a result of some policy decisions that have been made by the legislature. So this is why we need that study, for them to be able to look at some actuarial data, the claims data, bring all of that to the table so that the legislators can consider that in the next session. Okay, so that's all I had that I wanted to specifically share. I wanted to make sure there was time for anybody to ask questions or just to share your experiences like Julie did.
Yeah, there are questions. I would love to get to those.
Okay.
I'm wondering if this pool, though, that you're talking about means that if providers were in a pool that they would, I don't know. It seems like I wouldn't want to be part of a pool. I've never filed an insurance claim. I wouldn't want my rates to go up because other providers are doing claims. So it wouldn't benefit some providers and it would benefit others. So, so Dave had a comment in the chat. I wonder if there's a way to remove the risk descriptions, which is serious, short-term, etc., and instead just list the number of days required to fix the issue. The language makes things seem more serious than they are. And I will also add the number of times that it's listed in the IR report for one thing, which we talked about earlier, also makes it seem more serious. So I think that's probably something maybe licensing would answer, but that's a really good question.
Great idea. And I should have said at the beginning too, if anyone who's in the meeting from licensing, Ruben or others would like to jump in, please feel free to jump in and answer questions or offer anything that you have as well. I'm taking notes on that suggestion and any others that people have. So the risk descriptions and the number of times it's listed.
Okay, so someone asked about a waiver. If the provider doesn't have insurance, is there a waiver in place? I wasn't aware that DCYF required insurance. I know they require it for like ECAP but
it's a requirement for contractors. As far as I know, and licensing can correct me, I don't believe it's a requirement to be licensed, but it is a requirement for contractors in a number of different spaces that we have.
You need to provide your insurance document when you do the application for licensing.
Okay.
Yeah, it is a licensing requirement.
Okay,
I'm
sorry,
that they have liability insurance. Yes, well, it's a little separate, Emily, than the foster care side, which is through the contract. But child care licensing and child care providers, it is a WAC requirement. And Julie, just to kind of, I mean, it's one of those things we have to, get with Matt Judge, who is, oversees our state plan for CCDF requirements, and Michelle probably would bring you in as well. about what are the requirements in child care check regarding the federal requirements, right? And if there's any wiggle room right there that we can maybe change that and also meet the federal requirements as well.
Right. So a couple of people have asked about insurance for family homes. Is that also required?
I'm gonna let Ruben answer that one since I answered incorrectly before on the requirement. Ruben, can you?
I
I
can jump
believe-
in. Ruben, sorry,
Yep.
it's homeowners insurance. So they're in their home, so they have homeowners insurance is what it is.
Okay, so then we've got comment here. It'd be very helpful if DCWAC could provide a standard form or template that the child care provider can share with their insurance agencies. This could explain the specific liability insurance requirements for licensed providers. Many of us struggle to explain what is needed.
Okay. I copied that comment and putting that in my notes. Look into that.
Okay, it would be good for the OIC study to include a state-backed insurance pool. Other states are doing that due to insurance coverage being unavailable in climate disaster areas.
I think that's what their hope is for this, if it went forward with a joint underwriting association, that it would be a. Is that what? I don't know, I can't find that comment that you were just reading.
Oh, that was Susan, and it's pretty close to the bottom.
When you say state backed, do you, Susan, do you
Yeah, it's
mean?
different, it's different than insurance pools where the provider would, like a private insurance pool. The state being involved means that we are not the guarantors as providers, as I understand it. And forgive me, I'm not an insurance person, but I've been hearing about this in states where, like, when there's been multiple hurricanes and now people can't get homeowners insurance, so they're having to offer state-backed homeowners insurance as an example. I forgive my limited knowledge of it. That's about all I know. And I feel like probably from a childcare perspective, none of us is resourced well enough to be self-insured. And that's essentially what a risk pool is for childcare providers. And after talking with OIC, it would require every childcare provider to participate, because even with the numbers of providers that exist today, it's still a small risk pool. And then, as we all know, none of us have the kind of cash on hand to be, because it's basically self-insured risk pool. And we're saying we're going to back the claim, so to speak, as I understand it. And forgive me again, I'm not an insurance expert, but I think the state may have to get involved, because we're not requiring, because these plans are not, I forget what they're called, but there's a first tier of plans that have to be approved by the state, or there's some checks and balances there, but the childcare liability ones, they don't, the state is not involved in approving any increases or pulling out of the market or any of those kinds of things, because they're secondary market. That's why, because it's a secondary market. And so there is no leverage with the secondary market, and every insurance carrier could pull all this out of the state and we could do nothing about it. So it might be where, if we want childcare to continue and foster care to continue and those kinds of things, it may be where the state's going to have to get involved, unless they're going to change some laws or rules about what the secondary market can do without any consultation. And again, that's just my layman's understanding of a very complex system known as insurance. So hopefully, I hope that helps. I don't know, but that's my 2 cents.
It does. Thank you. Do you happen to remember which states that you heard that about?
I don't. And then I did a little research. I feel like, I want to say Florida, but knowing Florida's politics, I'm not exactly sure that is right.
I'll check Florida. Yeah, Florida's hit regularly with disasters like that. So
up further in the chat, Janelle said that she's trying to open an outdoor-based program. She already has another program, but she's been waiting for offers from insurance, was already turned down for one, but insurance wants the license first and licensing wants the insurance first. That's seems like quite a barrier there.
Yeah, I like to catch 22. I'm gonna see if there's someone in licensing that can speak to that cadence a little better than I can.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I, Travis, I wonder if I know Debbie had that go off, but I've never heard of that. Usually it's, I've never heard an insurance agent say, you need to be licensed before we give insurance. That's the first I've heard.
I think it has to, probably with the application is what it is. We can work through that. That should be able to be solved at the licensors level. If it's we can send something to the insurance companies so that they can issue the insurance and then we can do the licensing. That should be able to be solved.
Yeah.
We've worked through situations like that.
Okay. Thanks, Travis. I want to, Julie, if it's okay, I'd like to address a question regarding a waiver. And, I think someone asked in the chat about a waiver. So I think someone put in there, this is actually, it's an RCW, it's a statute. So it's law that childcare providers need insurance. So we can't waive a law.
Yeah, thanks for addressing that.
Yeah.
It looks like Marlene put a link to an article on state back plans in the chat for anyone interested. I'll definitely check that out. And that reminds me too, I said I would put the link to that RFP in there for anyone interested. So here's the link to the OIC RFP for that study that was funded. I'm also going to put my email address in here for anybody that would like to reach out, or you can share it with anyone who's not here, who'd like to share concerns or ask questions or anything like that about this going forward. It's like I said, a complicated thing, and I think it's going to take a lot of work over a lot of months to work through it. So
when do you think would be a good time to have you come back to this committee and have more discussion on the topic?
That's a good question. The study will be done in November. So certainly after that, or potentially maybe after the OIC does their report to the legislature, would be a good time. I don't want to push it out too long though. If there's something, let me say this, maybe that would be a good time to aim for end of the year because the study will be done. If there's something that I can share before that, then I can reach out and let you know, either provide something in writing or ask to be put on the agenda sooner than that.
Thank you.
So Emily, we had a meeting earlier this week with WCCA. So I assume OIC is going to reach out to us in DCYF and probably you as our point person for hearing from providers for the study. Is that correct?
That was what we talked about when we met with them in, I think, March. They said they were going to need our assistance in contacting folks and gathering information. So.
Okay, so you'll most likely reach out to me for a list of providers to work with OIC for this study then, I assume.
Yes, I imagine I'll reach out to a number of people, but absolutely you, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
So if somebody's been affected by their insurance being canceled or something like that, they could reach out to you and ask to be part of that group that you're going to be meeting with or something?
I'm not sure how they're going to select, how they're going to do their study or structure their study. I can create a list of people and then give that to the people who are doing the study. And I don't know how they're going to reach out to folks or how they're going to structure that, but I absolutely can.
So who's doing the study?
Well, that'll be a contractor that contracts with the Office of Insurance Commissioner. They have requests for proposals out on their website right now for people to bid, for companies to bid on doing the study. So they'll select one of those bidders. That closes next week. And so they'll select one of those bidders and I imagine get a contract in place pretty quickly. And then that company will then do the study. So it'll be a contractor doing that study. So I can pass along the contact information for anybody who would like to be contacted by them or like to share anything with them. And then I'll kind of leave it to them how they want to structure their outreach process. But absolutely feel free to reach out to me. I put my email in the chat.
Thank you. We do have a hand up, Andra.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit about my story about the insurance. So I was struggling with it for, I want to say 5, 6 months, and I wasn't getting any luck. So I finally found an agent in Texas that works with Alif childcare insurance. So he was helping me to get some quotes. And some of the agents, the insurance companies, said that they were not able to give me an insurance because there was a high criminal, it was in a high criminal area or something like that. And I didn't have any reports for the last 10 years in my childcare. So in any claim or anything, and I've always had insurance. So yeah, they just denied the application, and another insurance company was gonna give me an insurance, but it would cost me like 10,000 just for the liability, not the property insurance, so just liability. And I was like, that's just too much. And I mean, the subsidies right now are not high, and they haven't increased since 2023. So I couldn't really afford that. And I mean, we have to have insurance. So I just kept looking around, and I finally found someone that was able to give me a quote the same day. And it's called Next. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. And they didn't ask me for the what is it called? The loss runs for my previous insurance. And I was able to finally get one, and it was like I want to say 4,000. So I was like, I'll just go with that one. But that was after 4 or 5 months of looking around all over the US, because there's a group in that we have on Facebook from providers all over the US. So I tried all the insurance agencies that they put in the comments, but I had no luck until I found this one that was able to give me a quote fast and not so expensive. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. So hopefully some providers can check.
Thank you. I'm glad you found something. We are gonna move on to our next.
So Julie, can I?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. Emily, these are the stories that the vendor needs to hear, right?
Yes.
And so, Alondra, I just really appreciate you sharing your story. I also had some racial equity and social justice things that came out, you know, when they start. I mean, it's just, that's crazy. So these are the stories that the vendor need to hear and what OIC needs to hear. So we need to make sure that we get the right people for this study.
Thank you, Ruben. So Jessica put the link for the Menti in the chat. And I see we do have 2 comments. Please take a moment or 2 to put your feedback, questions, or comments in there, and it'll all be compiled and shared later. We're just going to take a minute and then we'll move on. Katie, you can take the reins when you're
Okay.
ready.
I'm ready. I'll give it about another minute or so to get that Menti board filled up, because this is a very important topic.
Yeah.
As I put in the chat, I pay a little over $17,000 a year, which is not easy. All right, don't see too many, so I'll just move on. Our last topic is huge. This has been since January and everything coming through with all the legislation and the budget cuts. So today we have the Government Affairs Policy Advisor, which is Courtney Parker, and then we're welcoming back Nicole Rose, which I just want to say, Nicole, you look amazing. Just FYI.
Thank you.
And they're going to go over policy updates, budget considerations, you know, everything that's come up and what we are going to, how we're going to be impacted by those. So take it over, ladies. Thank you.
Right. So Courtney is actually going to start us off and go over all of the budget, or I'm sorry, the bill pieces. And then I'm going to go over the budget pieces. And, you know, as we start this conversation, I just want to note again, the appreciation for all of you, everything that you do, and just recognize this was a really, really tough budget year. I think we have some wins, and we have some pauses and delays that we'll talk about, and we have some reductions as well. So Courtney, if you can lead us through some of the realities of session, legislation that passed, and then I'll do a deeper dive into the budget.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Katie. Thank you for that bit of contextualizing, Nicole, as well. Yes, and thank you for the next slide. This is one that folks have probably seen many times, but it is definitely a helpful overview for understanding the intersection between processes and roles. Looking at where the circle is around April and May, we are in that phase where session has ended. And as of yesterday, the governor has signed bills and put forth the budget. So state agencies are shifting to implementation. We're unpacking all of those updates still, and we will be able to provide more information as we are understanding it. And this is also a helpful slide for just displaying the ongoing and iterative and complex work that is happening all year long, and for really, as Nicole kind of said, noting the purpose of this presentation, and it's really to provide the information about the actions that the legislature took, and that we're not able to necessarily speak in great detail about the impacts of those changes and implementation at this very moment, as we're currently engaging in that initial implementation work and cannot provide or just do not have that level of detail yet. But also recognizing that there are those implementation questions at this moment, and that those will be addressed as plans are developed and communications are going out with those impacts. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. A couple of realities here to highlight. The first is that we know
Friday, period. Just have Molly go and get what they need.
Katie, thank you. That it was a long session. It was year one of the biennial session. So the session that sets the budget for the next 2 years, meaning the operating budget that goes into effect on July 1. We also have a new governor for the first time in 12 years. There was significant lawmaker change with some new policy chairs, new members across both chambers. We have a new secretary here at DCYF. So all of that just impacts dynamics, impacts the reality of things. There's also a very humbling, sobering, layered budget reality that our state is facing. It impacts all of our work, all of our lives. It is a $15 billion budget deficit over the next 4 years, and we are seeing spending outpace revenues. And as a result, the legislature had to make some very difficult choices around how to balance the budget, including a mix of service and program delays, reductions, and eliminations, as well as the legislature responding in areas necessary with new investment and revenue generation. And we see that multi-pronged and really challenging approach across DCYF programs. So I'll pause for a second. That was a good chunk of information because we're about to shift to an overview of the bills that passed the legislature in the early learning space. But I don't see any hands or any comments in the chat quite yet. So this is our first slide of early learning bills. And looking at that first one, House Bill 1351, this bill, as well as a portion of Senate Bill 5752, clarify and adjust ECAP entitlement and ECAP eligibility, meaning that this bill is largely technical changes and provides more clarity in statute, particularly that those turning 3 after the August 31st cutoff date can enroll in ECAP and are not considered as part of the entitlement. So really creating some efficiency and increasing a bit of access for more families. The next one, House Bill 1648, Nicole had talked about this one very early on in the meeting. This bill modifies childcare staff qualification requirements. Notably, it delays the timeline for providers to meet these requirements. It adjusts the length of experience-based competency, that pathway. And it also creates a work group for the department to continue this conversation and this important work with providers at the center of that work group. Next, we have Senate Bill 5030, which expands the type of document and record that are allowed to verify birth date or age of a child for enrollment. And this applies to ECAP and the broader K-12 system. Then there's Senate Bill 5769, and this puts transition to kindergarten programs on pause from growth by capping enrollment for next school year. The legislature also directs OSPI and DCYF to work on some planning and some phasing of the programs with certain considerations of the statewide early learning system and landscape, with a report due in December 2027 about that planning and phasing. And then the last bill on this slide is Senate Bill 5752, and this bill makes a number of modifications to early learning programs, and Nicole will touch on this during the funding pieces in the budget overview, but this bill also does a couple of other things. It clarifies the ECAP entitlement definition. It requires the Department for Compliance with Child Care Development Fund requirements to write rules and increase the frequency of the market rate survey and the cost of quality study. And it also directs the department to conduct a pilot for licensing school-age care in partnership with a local municipality. So some policy pieces and some funding pieces are included here. And I'll pause for another second if Nicole or Ruben or anyone else wants to jump in on any of these.
Thanks, Courtney. I think I'll just take a moment to talk a little bit about 1648 and some next steps there. I know there's a lot of interest in this, and we have gathered names over the course of the last year of folks who would want to participate in this work group. And so the legislation also names certain entities that must participate. So we are going through the process of listing out all of those entities, looking at the list of names that we've received to date, as well as reaching out to others. That will happen soon, and then putting together a work plan related to this. As Courtney said earlier, we are in the beginning stages of implementation here, but wanted you all to know that that's some of the first steps that we're taking related to 1648.
Just a quick note, we just had a note from the interpreters to slow down a bit. I think Nicole saw that. I just want to make sure, Courtney, you saw that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Dave, and thank you, Norma. I'm sorry, I will try to speak slower. That is a good reminder. Looking at this next set of bills, these involve more aspects of licensing and reducing barriers to facility operations for providers. And so looking at this first one, House Bill 1314, it makes updates and modifications to the Early Learning Facilities Fund program, which is administered in partnership with DCYF, but is through the Department of Commerce. Our next bill is Senate Bill 5509, and this is concerning the siting of childcare centers, and it requires childcare centers to be permitted as outright permitted uses in various zones except for industrial zones and light industrial zones. And cities may also impose reasonable restrictions on that permit. The next bill is Senate Bill 5545, and this exempts exempts off-base family home child care providers on or near military bases from state licensing if they are overseen and certified by a federal military service. The important aspect of this is that DCYF still retains CPS investigative oversight. Our next bill here is Senate Bill 5655. And this bill provides some important clarity around calculating occupancy loads. And so it clarifies that the occupancy load of a childcare center operated in a dedicated space within an existing building must be based only on those areas where the childcare services are provided. And then there's also one bill that is not on here, but Sandra had brought up a question earlier in the meeting about ESIT. And last week, Allison Krutzinger, our director of the Office of Public Affairs, and Renee Newkirk, our chief financial officer, provided an external webinar that goes over a much broader view of the budget impacts concerning DCYF. And one of the bills discussed is Senate Bill 5263, which is concerning special education funding. And within that bill, there is funding that increases the cost multiplier for the ESIT program. And so I just want to note that, and I will drop a link in the chat to that resource for the external webinar, the recording for it and the slides for it. If you're unable to attend, if you want to watch later, but just want to note that, and Nicole can speak to that as well if needed. But that covers bills. So thank you, and we'll turn it over to Nicole to provide a high-level overview of the conference budget.
Thanks, Courtney. And thank you for all that you did during a legislative session to support us here at the agency. Okay, so we are about to go on a journey together to talk about the realities of the budget that passed. And this is going to be broken down into a couple of different sections related to rates, eligibility, and some other pieces. Just to orient you to what you are seeing on the slides, anytime you see something that is in black, that means it was an increase in funding. Anytime you see something in red, that means it was a reduction or a delay. So this first section here is about our subsidy rates and some things that came out of the Child Care Development Fund, as I shared earlier today, that really bring our subsidy rates and payments closer to the private market. For center rates, there was a delay in the rate increase to the 85th percentile of the market rate survey until July 1 of 2026. What you will also see is that when those rates are increased, there was some savings achieved by removing what had been called hold harmless for a subset of providers. And what that meant was, in the past, if a provider had a rate that was above the 85th percentile already, they would have maintained that rate. With this policy change, all providers will have rates at the 85th percentile of the market rate survey, starting in fiscal year 27 for centers. I want to note that that is different for licensed family home providers. You'll see the next line here. is the collective bargaining agreement for licensed family home providers. And that investment was 381 million over the biennium. I do want to note that these are often, when you're seeing them, a biennial number across 2 years, unless it is saying specifically it is for 1 year. The collective bargaining agreement was fully funded. So what that means is that licensed family homes will have a rate increase to the 85th percentile of the market rate survey starting this July. The other thing I will note that you'll see in here, because it looks a bit different when I get to some of the grants and rate enhancements, is that trauma-informed care for licensed family home providers is reflected in the collective bargaining agreement because that is funded only for licensed family home providers moving forward. The last item you see on this page is related to the Child Care and Development Fund compliance. And this is funding to implement prospective payment. So where we are paying providers at the beginning of the month, care is expected to attend, paying based on enrollment. So paying on the child's expected attendance, whether they attend or not, which is something we had implemented several years ago for a period of time, and then not pursuing certain administrative overpayments. So those were the investments and some of the savings in working connections rates. We want to go to the next slide. So this is where we begin to really see some savings and some reductions. And so some of these savings really are achieved by delaying some expansions. And I think that in a tough and challenging budget year, as difficult as it is to see delays in eligibility expansion, delays in some of these pieces, the legislature is still signaling that these things are important and are still committing to do these things in future years. So the first one is delaying the eligibility expansion for working connections childcare to 75% of the state median income that was scheduled to occur this year. That will be delayed until July 1 of 2029. These next two, I suspect you might have some questions about, and so we'll get through some of this and then I'll pause for questions. These next two are related to what we often refer to as expanded eligibility and childcare subsidy. And there had been a real, I think, recognition around the importance of care for our childcare employees. And registered apprenticeships had been brought online to that as well. What is occurring here is some savings by removing childcare employees from the expanded eligibility category for working connections childcare. What is important for you to know is that these employees are still eligible under this expanded eligibility category through the end of June. If they had been determined eligible, let's say they were determined eligible this month, they would have a full 12 months of eligibility. July 1, that eligibility changes and actually goes away. Anyone who applies after that date would qualify under the existing working connections childcare subsidy rules. That is the same for the registered apprenticeships. Student parent eligibility, what you're seeing here is they are capturing some savings because we didn't have as many student parents as we had forecasted in the working connections caseload forecast. The next item we see here is a change to our co-payment structure for families. The federal rule related to copays really says that families should pay no more than 7% of their income. And the Fair Start for Kids Act really made some significant changes to copayments that I think have really increased access for families. What you're seeing in this change is some increases really starting in October 1, 2026 to a little bit of a different copay structure that is still based on the family size, which is good. And then you see some gradation, I would say, depending upon the state median income tranche that a family falls in, that it would range anywhere from 5% to 6.5% of state median income in that space. That does not go into effect until October 1, 2026. The items that I'm talking about right now are from Senate Bill 5752. And if you want more detail about that, you can look at that piece of legislation. This next item is 12-month eligibility determination. The Fair Start for Kids Act really looked at 12-month eligibility determination as making sure a family gets an entire 12 months of care once they have found a provider. So what that means is if I went and applied for child care subsidy on May 1st, 2025, but I did not find a provider until June 1st, 2025, under existing law, my 12 months of eligibility or care would run from June 1st, 2025 through May 30th, 2026. The savings that you see here are related to adjusting that 12-month eligibility period to really begin when a family is determined to be eligible for care rather than when they're authorized for care. So using that same example, if I went and applied for child care subsidy on May 1st of 2025, but I don't find a provider until June 1st, 2025, my eligibility still will run from May 1st now through the end of April 2026. So there's some assumed cost savings there. The other piece that 5752 was delay ECAP entitlement to the 2030-31 school year for all children defined as entitled. I will say that one thing that did also change related to this is being able to implement some of the increased eligibility levels for ECAP a year earlier, which is a win. I'm going to pause there because this is a lot of information, a lot of reductions, delays. I'm going to take a moment to take a look at the chat because I saw a couple of things come in and I want to make sure I can address these questions while we are on this slide.
Nicole, the two that came in were the one from Julie and the one from Darlene. I think those were the two that came in that were, I know there's some other stuff in there as well.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. That is very helpful. And I see those. Yeah, so Julie, the savings by removing what had been called hold harmless is, let's say and I want to note these numbers I'm saying I'm making up for illustrative purposes, but let's say that the rate a provider was being paid right now was $30 a day. But what the 2024 market rate survey said was that for that child's age in that region, that it really should have been $25 a day. There's savings assumed by taking that what had been paid at $30 down to the $25. In the past, what we would have done is continued to pay at that higher rate. But there was a policy decision made here to bring everybody to the 85th percentile when that is implemented. On the second question, if someone is currently eligible and expecting another child that arrives after July 1, I'm not sure if this is in reference to some of the expanded eligibility categories. But what I would say is anytime you have a second child or an additional child in the family, to notify us, go through the eligibility process, and then our team would determine eligibility based on the current rules at that time.
Nicole, with that, is that as soon as they know they're pregnant or as soon as the baby's born?
It's when they need care, Katie. So when
Okay.
the baby.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for that clarification. I will note that we're working on some communications related to all of these changes. There's a question in here about the 12-month eligibility change, and this is a tricky question for us to answer. One, the savings are assumed that it would be implemented on July 1. Two, we have very old legacy data systems that we use to determine eligibility, and it takes us some time to make changes. So we are working with DSHS and Barcode and our authorizing environment, meaning the Office of Financial Management and the Governor's Office, around when we believe we can implement that change, which is likely not until March of 2026. But this one, I just want to acknowledge, is a bit complicated. So Julie, to your question, this doesn't change the piece around if your private pay rate is lower than the subsidy rate. What it changes is if you are being paid a subsidy rate of $30 and that is higher than what the 2024 market rate survey says for that child, age, and region, that payment will be brought down to what the market rate says for that child, age, and region.
Can you explain how that even happens? I mean, to me, the only thing I can think of is if there's a special needs child that you're getting more funding for.
So there are a few rates and regions where we're seeing this occurring. And what I would like to do is follow up with those. I believe it's some school age rates in a couple of regions, but we can follow up with that with specific examples of where that would occur.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's go to the next slide.
Nicole, I think you missed one. Maybe
Oh.
I missed that you responded, but percentage of the increase for the parent copays?
Yeah, thank you, Sandra, and thank you, Katie, for catching that one. So we're working on a table to tell you exactly what that percentage increase is. And so I will follow up with that. It may come out in the notes or the feedback loop. Okay. So we're going to talk a bit about ECAP and Eclipse. So in ECAP, our Early Childhood Education and Assistance Program, which is our state-funded pre-K, you see a mixture of investment, reductions, and delays that we previously talked about. So for ECAP, there will be a 5% rate increase for school day slots. this coming fiscal year, so starting July 1, there will be a 5% rate increase for school day slots. We are also going to have a reduction in the number of ECAP slots that are available to contractors and providers. One of the things that I think is really important to note here is while this slide talks about a 3,000 part-day slot reduction beginning July 1, that we did not have all of the ECAP slots contracted out this fiscal year. So as we look at implementing this reduction in slots, we will need to reduce the number of ECAP slots that are contracted out by closer to 2,000 slots. Our ECAP team is working on this right now. We have surveyed all of our ECAP contractors. We have looked at voluntary reductions. We have looked at slots that have never been filled, and we're looking at a variety of other things. I also want to note in this space that when there's a reduction of a significant number of slots, that means that there is a reduction in the DCYF administrative rate as well. And I'm going to come back to that and talk about what that means for staffing and early learning after I talk through the rest of these pieces. The next piece we see related to ECAP is an increase in 250 school day slots in fiscal year 27. And then we have a reduction in the ECAP complex needs fund and a reduction in the early childhood intervention and prevention services, or ECLIPS. So these were projected underspends in each of these areas. For ECAP complex needs, I just also want to note that there had been one-time funds in ECAP complex needs that will no longer be there. So the ECAP complex needs fund will be about $4 million per year. On ECLIPS, this type of underspend, we're going to need to think about the number of children that we can serve with ECLIPS services in order to achieve those savings. And these are all pieces that we are beginning to work through what the realities of this mean. So if we can go to the next slide. And Sandra, Sandra, I see your hand.
Thank you, Nicole. Just a quick question. I worked on the task force committee a couple of years ago when we were working on ECAP entitlement with a goal to, of course, have it done by 2027. When you say that you are taking back the slots, does that just mean you're not filling them and will hold them until you have funding, or are we starting all over again with the number that's filled?
Yeah, thanks, Sandra. That's a really good question. And ECAP entitlement and how we get funded for that is a different way of looking at forecasting than we do in childcare subsidies. So here's what I will say is that we will continue to forecast entitlement for ECAP to look at the number of children and families that we believe will be eligible if they so choose to participate in 2030-31. But because ECAP is not slated to become an entitlement until that date, what occurs is the legislature makes a decision about the number of slots they want to fund in each fiscal year or biennial budget or supplemental budget. So they have taken back those 3,000 slots. So instead of having 17,278 slots, we'll now have 14,278 slots. And then they'll continue to add until we get to the number that we would need by the time we reach entitlement. The other thing I would say here is that as we're looking at ECAP entitlement, they are also looking at what is the number of children being served by transitional kindergarten. So it doesn't completely reset things. It acknowledges the number of children that were enrolled now, but still says entitlement is important, and we're going to keep working towards that in 2030, 31 now, instead of 2026, 27. So DCYF doesn't hold on to those slots. The legislature has taken them back. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about some program reductions and some eliminations as well. So this is a space where there are some different things happening now for licensed family homes and for child care centers. So for trauma-informed care, this was eliminated for center-based providers and retained for family child care providers to the amount that was funded in the collective bargaining agreement. When things like that occur, that reduces the amount of funding available for staffing, for training, and some of those pieces. So this is a place where we're going to need to go and look at the law, look at what's in the collective bargaining agreement, and think about the best way to roll out these enhancements moving forward. Dual language designation had a 50% reduction for center-based providers, and it was retained for family child care. So there are certain amounts that are in the collective bargaining agreement for family child care, and center-based providers will still be able to access this fund as well. Early ECAP is something that had been talked about in the beginning of session as potentially repealing the entire program, so meaning it would have been repealed from law. In the end, what occurred here was the program law is maintained, but it became subject to appropriation, and funding for early ECAP was eliminated. So that is 178 early ECAP slots that were eliminated. We are working to communicate with those providers that if those families have not already applied for Working Connections childcare, helping them have the resources, the information to apply, and then connecting with Childcare Aware if for some reason they needed to go to a different provider. And then Working Connections seasonal childcare. This is a savings that was achieved by removing funding that was a bit duplicative. These children and families who had accessed seasonal childcare in the past are all actually eligible for regular Working Connections childcare. If we want to go to the next slide. Here are some other reductions that have occurred in this space. So some of these are related to some of our grants and enhancements. Much of this really came from Fair Start for Kids Act and expansion sometimes of services. So equity grants, this funding was reduced by 50%. And it is still available for center-based providers and retained for family child care as well. Complex Needs Fund for child care providers was reduced in funding by 25%, still available for both our licensed family homes and center child care providers. Early learning facilities, technical assistance, these funds really lived in two different spaces. And what we're talking about today are funds that lived in the operating budget. And so there was a reduction of 692,000 in funding for ELF technical assistance. Now, ELF is funded out of the capital budget, and I'll talk about that in a moment and what is available through that. Facilitated play and learn groups was a place where we saw expansion in the Fair Start for Kids Act. And so when you look at that, you can think about some of our services to our family, friends, and neighbors providers. We still have funding for core services related to this. However, the expansion that occurred in the Fair Start for Kids Act was reduced. The final two I'm going to talk about are related to infant and early childhood mental health. We saw some significant expansion in infant and early childhood mental health consultation over the years. And this funding has been reduced by 4.354 million. But we still will maintain some services out to providers. We also see a reduction in funding to the tribal mental health consultation by looking at some places where there was some assumed underspend. So I want to acknowledge that as we talk about these pieces, that this is difficult to share. We know that funding is really needed in these spaces, and this is really just a reflection of the significant budget challenges that we have in the state of Washington. While we see many reductions and delays in this, one of the things that I am thankful for is that there are still some core funding there related to subsidy rates. There is still a commitment to continuing to expand, a commitment to reaching pre-K entitlement. It's just going to take a little bit longer than we had anticipated. So I see a question in the chat about seasonal childcare, and I'm going to turn to that before I talk a little bit about some of the staffing impacts, just so that you all are aware. And then we'll turn to some new investments. So the question in the chat was, what impact will the removal of seasonal childcare funding have on families who rely on care during agricultural or summer work periods? So there will be no impact on those families if they are otherwise eligible for regular working connections childcare. So that seasonal childcare language had been there in the case of a wait list previously, but all of these families are now eligible for regular working connections childcare. So there should be no impact. So and I see in the chat, you know, that infant early childhood mental health consultation and just, you know, the real impact and assistance that this has had in our provider community. And again, as you all are providing care to children every day, and I know we've talked about the complexity of needs coming into care. And so you know, trying to maintain some core services and making sure that the dollars that remain really are going to as many direct services as possible is something that we are focused on in the agency. I want to talk with you a little bit about staffing because I think it's important for you to know before we go into new investments. I talked about the significant reductions in ECAP. Some of the other items I talked about had actual FTE reductions in them as well. And some items, the funding was reduced so much and the funding needs to go to children and families and providers that we are not able to maintain the staffing in some of those areas. So what does that mean? So what that means for the early learning division in particular, and I'm just going to talk about the early learning division right now, is that we had to do a reduction in force of 17 FTEs. Of those 17 FTEs, 13 of those positions were filled. I cannot share much more than that right now, but it's important for you to know that some points of contact and some of those pieces may look different. And we are working through the process with our staff related to that, because while positions may have been eliminated, one of the great benefits of being a state employee is, having the right to a position. And so just know that we are navigating these things and really working on attending to our employees with care and empathy right now, and then attending to the reductions for our providers so that they can know what their budgets will be. And I also acknowledge that as some of the funds that go out to providers and contractors have been reduced, that this means there may be reductions or staffing layoffs out to our contracted partners as well. And so I share that to say, let's be kind to one another and have deep empathy and care right now. So that being said, I am very confident that there is going to be money again someday. And when there is money again someday, we are going to have a very strong system to rebuild. So here are a couple of pieces of new investments just for your awareness. One piece, there is one change to this, and I'll have Courtney help me with that one. There is some continued investment for Washington Communities for Children, who helps with many of our early learning networks. And there was continued investment in the Early Learning Facilities Fund. So $51 million provided to fund the Early Learning Facilities Grant, $9 million for minor renovations, and $3 million provided for emergency grants. So DCYF does receive a portion of those funds, to a smaller portion, to provide technical assistance. And so I know that Ruben and myself and team are working through what that will look like moving forward. And Courtney, do you want to talk about the child care mental health pilot program and what we saw in the governor's budget that was signed by the governor? Excuse me.
Yeah, absolutely. So yesterday, the governor provided a veto letter for sections of the budget that he vetoed, and one of those was section 236.21, which is the child care mental health pilot program, because it was deemed that funding is not sufficient for the procurement and to provide contract oversight for this pilot program. So this pilot was vetoed. DCYF is not directed to conduct it for this coming fiscal year for the next biennium. So there will be an updated version of these slides on the DCYF Government Affairs webpage that shows that this pilot has been vetoed and DCYF will not be overseeing it.
Thanks, Courtney. So if we want to go to I think what we have is the final slide. We spent some time talking about this today with Emily, and just really appreciate all of the feedback and stories that you are sharing with your experiences related to insurance. And this is highlighting that feasibility study. And, we will be sure to come back to you all with what that process will be to participate in the work group and to share your stories. I will say that it is so impactful when legislators can hear from you all about the experiences that you are having related to this. So again, thank you so much for sharing those pieces. So those are all of the early learning updates that we have related to budget. I think, Courtney, if we didn't already do so, if we can drop in the chat the link to the external webinar. We did do, I think Courtney referenced this, the webinar that was done by Allison and Renee that goes over all of the pieces related to funding across the agency. And talks about some of the other administrative efficiencies and things that needed to be achieved across the agency, which included FTE and other pieces as well. So you can check that out and, you know, let either of us know if there are any questions. So
There's one in the chat from Hudan.
Yep, I see that. I'm just reading that. Yeah, and so the $3,000 in funding that was actually vetoed because there weren't enough resources in order to implement that. And I think, you know, I hear the need to consider the intersection of mental health and disability and behavioral health needs moving forward. What I would say is that there is not additional funding to do pilots or anything like that at this point in time. That is not within this budget. So I just want to thank you all again for everything that you're doing. And again, if you have questions as you digest all of this, please don't hesitate to reach out. Janelle, yes, and I saw I'm realizing you had a question in the chat as well, but go ahead and come off mute.
That's my same question.
Okay. Yep, I just realized I missed that. So, so it's a question about micro credentials, and you know, I think it will be a worthy discussion in the 1648 work group about, you know, micro credentials. What does that mean? What does that look like? How might we be able to take experience into consideration in a micro credential? I will say we had kind of paused on some of that because really trying to look at how do we meet some of the foundational staff qualifications requirements. But I know I've seen some of my team on here, and I think, you know, we'll put that down as something we need to think about if it's something we can continue to look at as we do the staff qualifications work group.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. And this is, like I said, a hard topic and so many cuts, so many new things coming down the line, having to wait for the funds to come to us. But thank you so much. That was greatly appreciated by, I'm sure, everybody. We do have a couple more. Oh, nope, just thank yous. If you can go on to the Menti and, you know, provide any additional feedback or questions that you guys may have, this is going to be great for moving forward with future meetings, especially with all the legislation and funding. Again, thank you guys so much. And thank you to all of our presenters today. I am so happy to see so many from DCYF and see Travis is back. And I know it's a hard time for everybody, including you guys. Sometimes you guys are on the spot and we get very upset or frustrated as providers, but we do want to know that we recognize how hard you guys work for us day in and day out. So, all right. So if you guys can do the Menti, again, that is great. Any reflection, it helps us as the co-chairs as well as the community engagement to help provide topics for future meetings. Like I said, our next meeting is, I can't believe I want to say July, but Wednesday, July 16th. So put that on your calendars. And thank you guys so much. We had a great turnout today. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week. And I hope everybody has a 3-day weekend with Memorial Day this weekend. So have fun, be safe. Thank you guys so much.